What is up, fantasy people? Welcome back to the True North Fantasy Pod, presented by Monkey Knife Fight. We are, of course, proud members of the Fantasy Points Media Group. Love working with the Fantasy Points team over there. I am Trav, live in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Of course, co-hosting and West Coasting is Tyrell McLaughlin. What's going on tonight, Bohemian Rhapsody?
Same old, same old. I thought you were going to say from Dirty Laundry Studios. I thought you were going to say it there.
Oh, man, you had to mention it. I miss Dirty Laundry Studios, Ty. I told you before the show that I feel lost in my intro without Dirty Laundry Studios. You had to throw that in there when we went live, eh?
Well, I thought you were about to say it. That's why.
No.
You know, if you want another deep cut, how about the NHL draft tomorrow? Your Flames got a high pick after their 2020 season. Jays are back in the motherland tomorrow, Trav, and training camps are starting next week. So life is good. Life is good. We got a beautiful guest tonight too.
This is going to be a lot of fun. Our guest tonight is somebody who, we followed on Twitter and, loved following on there for a long time. Personally, I recently started interacting with this gentleman. We were both a part of the 102 group chat of the Scott Fishbowl. Represent.
Yeah, the 102 live crew, baby.
That is right. And he actually also came very highly recommended by our friend Dave Wright, which is the FF_Spaceman on Twitter. Go back and check that episode, everybody out. Dave is great, and it was a really good show. We had a lot of fun on that one. But tonight's guest is Mr. Zac Reed. He can be found on Twitter at TacitAssassin13. Pretty sure I got that pronunciation right, Zach. How are you doing tonight, man?
I am fantastic, and you hit it spot on. I think that it's about like a 30% hit rate when I go on pods, whether people hit that. I get a lot of tacket. It's and I'm like, no, the Tic Tac Assassin. I was like, no, tacit. It's implied. It's silent. I'm there in the weeds, but when I speak, I'm here. But no, it's great to be on with you fellas. I feel bad that I'm going to tarnish Dave's reputation, on his recommendation that I'm here, but
no shot,
man, it's gonna be great.
Shot. Yeah, I'm pumped, and Dynasty Dummies is truly one of the OG, Dynasty podcasts for sure. The singing I was mentioning before is 100% what actually drew me in, and I told you I just cannot believe how long you've kept it up, man. They are still so good and so creative. The Zero RB 1979 parody was excellent. I happen to be a big Smashing Pumpkins fan, and I got to tell you, the vocals have only improved through the years, I would say too.
I appreciate it. It's all because of the new mic. I mean, it's still just the same old me with the bad voice but technology, but the new mic has really helped me. But I have a drive, like a Google Drive, with almost 200 of those parodies, because like we're at episode 207. I think I started doing them about 20 shows in, so I'm almost at 200 parodies, which is a little bit ridiculous even for me.
I love it.
It is much appreciated. So I'm just going to dive right in because there's not a lot to know for this episode, Trav. Like, we're going to run through 10 to 15 teams, try to get to as many of the most important things to follow as we gear up for training camps and preseason, because come next week, guys, camps are going to be in full force, and the barrage, the bombardment of news will come fast and heavy, and we can really start to lose sight of the forest through the trees, as we like to say. And I think everyone will get a good feel once I just jump in anyway. So we may as well start with the biggest news in the last couple of days here coming out of La La Land. Cam Akers tears his Achilles. Actually, to quote Zach on his Dynasty Dummies episode, I thought he said it perfectly. Everybody and their brother has given their take now on Darrell Henderson, which basically, by the way, makes all three of us a few basic B's because, Trav, you and I, we went through all the comings and goings surrounding the season-ending injury that is in our feed. And Zach, you also have a really good fresh one off the presses, a very thoughtful breakdown, I thought, regarding Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson and all the fallout. I'll put the links when the show's done to the Dynasty Dummies in the description as well. At Tacit Assassin 13 is probably the easiest way to find it, actually. But yeah, maybe we'll rapid fire the Rams a little bit more is what I'm saying as we start here. And we'll just send folks to the Dynasty Dummies on iTunes or wherever to get a more comprehensive breakdown. So I'm going to just rip the Band-Aid off here, Zach. Darrell Henderson, is he a top 24 running back for 2021? And for Dynasty, are you buying high or are you using this as a sell window?
So to your first question, I think he's right on the cusp. I think he's somewhere between, 18 and 28. I don't see the upside as being a running back one, but I do think that he'll get enough work in LA and that team is going to be prolific enough that he'll be good for you in Dynasty. This is absolutely a sell window for me. And I said that on the pod yesterday, but if you drafted Darrell Henderson at like 106, 107, because that's where he was going. He was all the rage. And I tried as best I could to push him down into the second round, but people were adamant that he was a first round pick. If you did that, this is your time to sell. This is your time to recoup some of your losses. And I mean, even if you say, you can get like a 2023 first, like do something, get out, maybe even package a second with him or a third, but I would get out unless he's really integral to my build.
So just thinking about, because I have him right in that range too, running back 25, and I couldn't get him into that running back 2 territory in my Dynasty rankings, even after updating them. But I do think he lands in like sort of an interesting tier where you might be looking at the back of the tier once you're about to hit off the cliff past the running back dead zone. You have to fall pretty far past running back 25 to get to running back 32 is what I'm getting at. But what I'm saying is somebody who's ranked higher in redraft than he is in my Dynasty rankings definitely lends to selling the guy. There's no doubt about it. But with the timing of all this, the Rams don't have a lot of options. They can look to the scrap heap. They can monitor camp cuts. But what I'm getting at here, Zach, is do you think we should be waiting until Henderson has a few big weeks in season? Or should we sell him for, say, running back 24 prices right now?
I think people are going to smarten up and they're either going to sign somebody. So, Gurley's still out there. Lev Bell's still out there. There are a few, I think, was it Duke Johnson's still out there? Like there's some guys that are still floating around, but even in the past seasons when they took Henderson in the draft and traded up to get him, he was still playing behind Malcolm Brown. He was still playing behind Todd Gurley. It was the shell of Todd Gurley. And then last year you saw them come out and draft Cam Akers high. And even when Henderson was starting, he was the starter from week 2 to 11, Malcolm Brown still outsnapped him in over half of those games. And so I really think that the Rams are reticent to give the reins to Darrell Henderson. And so waiting and, spinning that roulette wheel and hoping that he has a big couple of weeks that you can sell him. I mean, that's fine. But if he's been on your roster for 2 years and you don't take this opportunity, that's on you, man. I'm going to get out while the getting's good right now.
Totally. And I think one thing everybody should agree on is that this all kind of helps the Rams passing game. Like the wide receivers are just even more salivating, in my opinion, now who, the Rams without Cam Akers no longer have that bell cow to kind of fall back on. And with Stafford coming in, there's just so many ways. There's so many areas in this offense that they're set to improve, especially in the passing game. And even when you think of Stafford, you think of some of the other player turnover that we've seen from the Rams offense during the offseason. I think another very important thing to observe during Rams camp is how much 11 versus 12 personnel, like will we see McVay and company kind of revert back to heavy 3 wide receiver sets, because then we'll definitely be more interested in someone like Van Jefferson and, D-Jax. I'm not sure how much we see of him during preseason, but is Tutu Atwell, running around in motion, catching some screen passes. I think that would be great news for Bobby Woods. And these are things that I think are more likely now that Cam Akers is is injured. And maybe to cap off the Rams on like a running back note here, I want to know, what does that running back market share look like? But, to Zach's point, I don't know if we get to see a ton of Darrell Henderson, who's battled, ankle injuries and stuff in his first 2 seasons during preseason. Do we get to see or get this opportunity for him to rise in value before the season? I'm not so sure. Moving into the other team in La La Land, the Chargers, who will certainly heap a ton of targets on their running back position and will also be in 3 wide receiver sets constantly. What I'm less sure of with the Chargers, though, is who is the running back 2 behind Austin Eckler? Also, is it just one guy? Is that guy the goal line back? So between Justin Jackson, Larry Roundtree, Joshua Kelly, what do you see unfolding there behind Austin Eckler, Zach? And are you interested in that guy for fantasy?
Well, and I think that's the problem. I think it's you unfold this old pirate map and it says beyond here there be dragons. And that's it. Like beyond Eckler, like what? It's dangerous. Like you've seen what Josh Kelly is and it's meh. You have been hoping to see what Justin Jackson is for the last couple of years, and it hasn't been there. In fact, a couple of years ago, I was touting him to be the guy instead of Eckler because of his production in college and because of his ability to be both a pass catcher and a runner, and that never happened. And Larry Roundtree is just kind of uninspiring at best. I mean, he's a between the tackles guy, and that's fine. But
it's in the name.
But yeah, but I think that. Really, it's Austin Eckler there, and if he happens to get injured again, or then it's it's kind of a lost backfield. Once again, it's a place where you can get value because people get excited. I mean, this is the time of year to me where it gets really tricky to navigate because everybody's dreaming. Everybody has the upside. Everybody has Josh Kelly could be the guy. Justin Jackson could be that guy if Eckler went down, and we get so caught up in like those hopes that we forget sometimes the reality. And it's why I love to listen to somebody like Peter Howard, because he is fantastic at bringing you back to like, hey, this is what is probably going to happen, not the dream. And so it's a tough situation where you're kind of caught between the dreams and the drum beats from training camp, and you gotta navigate.
You're right, and even sometimes the smoke signals can lead you astray because everything is kind of pointing towards a strong run game for the Chargers. But you're totally right. We're not gonna necessarily have confidence in judging this RBBC or getting the handcuff right that you might hold for 8 weeks. That's a really good point, and something sometimes I have a problem remembering.
Oh, we all do, man.
Yeah, especially when there's 3 options, right? Like it's Justin Jackson has been on too many of my dynasty rosters for entirely too long is the problem, I think. He was way more efficient too, Ty. Way more efficient than the other guys last year. He had like less than 3/4 of the carries of Kalen Ballage and Josh Kelly, and he was way more efficient. He had more missed tackles forced. He had more 10 plus yard runs. He almost had the same amount of yards after contact with that much less carries. So I think he's got to be the guy. I think the new regime factor is interesting for him because the previous regimes really liked him and kept him around, whereas this one, it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds as we roll through camps here.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, right? Like this new coaching staff, hopefully we don't get it too twisted, right? There's no doubt that Justin Herbert will still be the spark that makes this engine fire. And I think they'll still let him sling the rock quite a bit, which doesn't detach Austin Eckler from this conversation. And I think when I think of that, the top 2 targets in this offense are pretty locked in my opinion. I think Keenan Allen's the obvious number 1, and I would say Austin Eckler is the clear number 2, but who's the number 3? Because it's summer and Mike Williams' breakout season is always stylish during the summertime. It's always in vogue. So
we got a comment too. Mike Williams season.
Exactly. Right on cue. And there's just so much solid depth behind Big Mike is my issue. And I like Tyron Johnson. I like Jalen Guyton and I like Joshua Palmer. So Zach, does Mike Williams put it all together finally in the final year of his deal? Or are you taking shots on some of the ancillary pieces?
I think that whoever you end up with is going to be, it's one of those guys who's a great like wide receiver 3 or 4 because you're going to have big weeks. I mean, you're tied to Herbert and his big arm, and that really like that should benefit Mike Williams. I mean, Mike Williams is the downfield guy that, has got the length, can go up and get it. Palmer, you mentioned him. He's another guy who is a mid 4.5s guy that you want to be faster, but isn't quite, but is a field stretcher. To me, I think you probably want Mike Williams. The player that I'm really interested in, though, on that team and in preseason and listening to see if I hear his name, is not a wide receiver. It's 6'8" Donald Parham, who went to Stetson, then played in the CFL. Yeah, played in the CFL, and then came over and he had 3 touchdown catches last year on 10 catches. Yeah. He averaged almost 16 yards per reception, and if you watch him, he moves like Kevin Garnett. Like, he's got that real fluid, like, big guy, but like a little guy in a big guy's body. And so again, he's one of those tight end stashes. I loved him coming out, and he's a name that I want to hear in training camp because what he does absolutely fits with Herbert's, the big arm and sling it around and make some plays.
And Adam Troutman was out snapping Jared Cook by the end of last season in New Orleans as well. And so on Kevin Garnett, anything is possible. Let's go to the Green Bay Packers because we're going to head into some pretty heavy speculation territory here. I might even go like more true or false style with you, if you don't mind, just because it is pretty heavy speculation. So Aaron Rodgers is the starting quarterback for Green Bay week 1. True or false?
True for me. I think he's back.
Yep.
What do you say, Trav?
Yeah, true. I think so too.
Okay. A.J. Dillon is going as the running back 32 in FFPC Dynasty leagues since May. A.J. Dillon will be more expensive 1 year from now. True or false?
Oh, false for me. I'm not a Dillon guy, but
I'm in the same camp. Zach. I just have a hard time seeing him wrestling enough workload away from Aaron Jones, who just signed a new 4-year deal. Who, if Aaron Rodgers comes back, Aaron Rodgers is going to heavily lean on Aaron Jones. Like, I guess AJ Dillon can get in Aaron Rodgers' good graces, but I mean, Aaron Jones, man, like, he's elite.
And this is about where he was going last year. So I thought that was really interesting for AJ Dillon. So you're really hoping that he goes up. I'll put it that way. Allen Lazard is the clear number 2 in Green Bay among the wide receivers and tight ends. What do you guys think?
False.
Yeah.
False.
Yeah, I think
So who is it?
Well, so I think that the guy that I'm going to want there is Amari Rodgers, and because he's going to play out of the slot, and if you, I didn't love him coming out. So my comp to him was, so you have a favorite Chinese restaurant, like you can picture the egg roll, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to get like that. Yeah. See, I'm hitting it. So that's AJ Brown. Not Allen Lazard. Amari Rodgers is the gas station egg roll that's been on the rollers for a while. It looks like that same egg roll that you're getting from your favorite, but it's not quite. But in a pinch, it'll do. And I think that with Aaron Rodgers' efficiency, and you've obviously got Devontae Adams and the out of the backfield Aaron Jones, I think that there's going to be enough meat on the bone for Amari Rodgers to do some things out of the slot. And I'm sick of waiting around for whoever's going to be the outside receiver opposite Devontae Adams, because that hasn't panned out. I mean, we've been waiting for, since Randall Cobb left.
Eons.
And it might not be, me and Trav have talked extensively how it's not as important in the new LaFleur era, right? Like, it's just not something we should be as interested in for sure. And I love the call about Amari Rodgers. The one thing I want to follow during training camp is, where does his market share come from? Does it come from Aaron Jones? Does it come from Bobby Tonyan, who obviously needs a big uptick in volume to compensate for regression? And so a lot to follow for the Cheese Domes, even with Aaron Rodgers back in the fold.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation there. I kind of like you see Amari Rodgers as like that after the catch guy. I was thinking he could play a lot like Randall Cobb, and that's something that they've been lacking since then, like you said. So that was a great point, Zach. And I think for me, like as far as if you're picking an outside guy or whatever, I'm not going to do that. I'm probably just going to go Robert Tonyan because I think he has a better chance at getting double-digit touchdowns for my roster than either of those guys has of giving me 800 yards and 5 touchdowns. So that's kind of where I would lean as far as if I had to pick, I would take the touchdown upside. So I'm going to move us along here, Ty. But before I do that, I want to just give a big shout out to our friends at Monkey Knife Fight. I mentioned off the top, we are presented by Monkey Knife Fight. And of course, we love playing the prop games over there. Obviously, football is on its way, and we're excited to lay some cash down on that. But we also have tons of good stuff going on right now. Basketball obviously just ended. Congratulations to the Bucks
NHL
again.
draft tomorrow.
NHL draft. So we're getting into sports time. You can obviously throw down on the MLB games, and we've got some big UFC fights obviously every weekend. So it's a lot of fun to play over there on Monkey Knife Fight. Any skill level, any knowledge, any expertise level, you can go in there and you can enjoy it and put a little bit of skin in the game. So use our promo code TNFF on there to get an instant match on your first deposit of up to $50. That is monkeyknifefight.com. Promo code's TNFF to turn your $50 deposit into a cool hundy. So just going to say thanks to the team over there for all their support. And I'm going to move us down to the Mile High City, gentlemen. We're talking Denver Broncos. This is actually a team that's been widely connected to Aaron Rodgers if he were to leave town. As we move along through the offseason and we see some of the tea leaves, it looks like that's less and less likely to happen. But we are going to zero in first on that quarterback position, guys, because I think it has a huge factor on what we think of these pass-catching weapons, which is the pieces that we're really intrigued about on this team, and the pieces that have the most questions coming into training camp. So, Zach, I'm going to start with you. Like, do you think we're going to see like a 50-50 first team split when we're in training camp? Do you think the team leans a certain way? And how would you like to see it shake out?
For fantasy, I would love to see Teddy take over that role, because I think that you don't know what you're going to get with Drew Lock from week to week, and his inaccuracies. Like that's just a mess. And I would rather see Teddy at the helm for selfish reasons. I mean, for purely fantasy, for Jerry Jeudy and the return of Courtland Sutton, and for spoiler alert, when Javonte Williams takes over that backfield. Like I'm ready for that.
Yeah, so ready. So ready. Yeah, I'm kind of in that camp too. I think with what Teddy did last year with the Carolina Panthers, being able to uphold 3 really good weapons, 3 fantasy relevant weapons, that was more than I thought he was going to give us out of those pass catchers last year. So I was really impressed that way. I think the jury's out on whether Pat Shurmur can put together an offense that Matt Rule and Joe Brady put together. I think that could be a factor, not so much in Teddy Bridgewater or even Drew Lock's favor, to be honest with you, with Shurmur at the helm. But I think Teddy Bridgewater is who I favor. Ty, what do you think we're going to see with those two, and what do you want to see?
Yeah, I think like Teddy has some familiarity with Shurmur, and I think it would be a much different offense, right? Like Carolina was a pretty bad football team last year, especially in the second half of the season. Lots of end zone interceptions, so Teddy wasn't even like the safe Teddy we were accustomed to. Having said that, Denver is going to rely heavily on their top 10 defense, I would imagine, and their win total is definitely jarring when you first look at it. So I wouldn't mind seeing Teddy because he can limit the turnovers and everything. But there's another side of me that thinks they owe it to themselves a little bit to give Drew Lock that one last shot, and then you can go to Teddy at one point, because it would not be great to have to go to Teddy with the playoffs on the line last 6 weeks of the season or something, or go to Drew Lock when push comes to shove. And then also you got the Peyton Manning effect, who's probably in that organization's ear a little bit, in that front office's ear. And he seems to be on the Drew Lock side because he's worked with him in the offseason. Right. I hate Narrative Street, but it just seems like Peyton Manning does have some influence on that organization. It's not just that he's working with some guy.
So well, and that's a smart move on Elway's part, because he's been saying that he owes it to himself to start this guy for the past like 4 or 5 years. And so it is kind of a good endorsement that Peyton likes Drew Lock. And I think, if Drew Lock could put it together, that's where the ultimate upside for the pass catching weapons would lie, because he is more not prone, but he is more ready and willing to huck it downfield, which would be good for KJ Hamler and Courtland Sutton, I would think. But I want to talk to you, Zach, to see how you think this shakes out, because with Sutton down, Jerry Jeudy, who we thought was a slot guy, was kind of all over a little bit. He had a lot of missed opportunity, unfortunately, last year, but I think some of that's in large part to Drew Lock. I'm curious how you see it shaking out. Do you think Jeudy kicks into the slot like almost permanently, and then Courtland Sutton on one side, and then who else do you think comes in there on the other side if that's what you think happens?
Well, I would love to see Jeudy work more out of the slot. I think that he's actually going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of Courtland Sutton coming back. He reminds me. So when I start attacking wide receivers, I try to mine value, and you can kind of win at the margins. And one of the places you can win is with guys who are a number one receiver from the number two role. So guys like Chris Godwin were, Jarvis Landry is that way. I mean, there are guys that can do that. Juju Smith-Schuster was that way. And I really think that Jerry Jeudy fits that mold to a T, where he's very, very good underneath when somebody is taking coverage over the top and maybe taking the number one corner. He's exceptional against zone coverage. And so that's the type of player that I think you can find value with. And you mentioned Pat Shurmur. He gets a bad rap because he coached the Giants into oblivion. But when he was an offensive coordinator, don't forget he was in Minnesota and running that Thielen and Diggs. So don't panic. Don't panic too much with this offense, because I think Shurmur, as an offensive coordinator, when he doesn't have everything on his plate, is a lot more in his depth, and so that's what I envision happening. The guy that I'm really interested in, and this is another, I feel like I'm bringing it into the tight end position again, but the guy that I'm really interested in is recovering from an ACL, and it's Albert Okwuegbunam. And
A-okay.
That's A-okay with us.
This guy is as athletic as Noah Fant, and is like a fifth of the cost in your fantasy football leagues. Like, people forgot that Okwuegbunam came in when Fant went down and just absolutely destroyed things. And that's a guy that I am really interested to see come back, and see B, where he fits in this offense, because I really love his skill set.
Yeah, he was an athletic freak coming out. Ty, you love you some A-OK. I know that you actually coined that nickname. I'm going to give you that. I can't. We can't.
Well, that was why no one was talking about him during the draft processes, because they couldn't pronounce his name. Tight end in that class for me. Yeah, I really liked him.
Yeah, he's it'd be sweet to see him get on the field more. I'm looking right now, and they ran 12 personnel on 22% of their plays last year, so we could see that potentially go up. I think that's probably to the detriment of KJ Hamler, but I think that just makes their offense more versatile if they choose to use it, right? So that was a really, really good point there. Ty, I want to hear what you think about Courtland Sutton and what he could potentially do, because there is a chance that he could potentially go on the PUP. What do you think about that? Do you think he does land there, or will he start the season and give us maybe that strong wide receiver 2 production that we hope for?
Yeah, well, that's what we get excited about for camp, right? Like, teams can't lie anymore, so we'll see if he's on the field. Players like Terrace Marshall are on the field, and then we can start asking these questions, right? Because the whispers will start the first day that camp has commenced, and he ain't there. So we'll start the whispers pretty soon. But I'm not too worried about it. Like, he's had time to recover. It happened, week 1 or week 2 last year. So hopefully he's good to go. And we have some time to observe him. Hopefully they get him in there for at least one series with the ones and stuff. And we'll see. But I think everything lends to Jerry Jeudy, because he's the one who has question marks in this offense for sure. And I think it was put perfectly by Zach, where he said, he can beat zone. And that's why I hope he is in the slot with Jerry Jeudy, because he's just going to get so open so quickly. Mm-hmm. It's going to feel a lot like, especially with the strong offensive line, which is kind of being slept on in Denver, I think, coached up by Mike Munchak. So I think it's going to be Michael Thomas, Teddy Bridgewater from that 5-game Saint sample kind of thing going on, if Jerry Jeudy is in the slot quite a bit.
Let's hope. He just won't have to be that air yards guy that he was last year. He's top 10 in the league in air yards, which is just kind of not the role that he should be playing.
Top 5 in air yards too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Another team that we expect a lot of air yards out of, in fact, is the Cincinnati Bengals. And those air yards would likely be coming from the hand of one Joe Burrow, the first overall pick. Yet last year out of LSU, obviously that devastating knee injury, and that's kind of where I want to start. And Zach, I'm going to start with you. Like, do you think we're going to see him right away at the start of the season? It seems like that's a foregone conclusion for most, but I've seen some hesitation out there a little bit.
He's a lot further ahead in his rehab than I anticipated him being. I expected probably, halfway through this season, we would see Burrow, start to throw and come back, and maybe toward the end of the season. But man, he's been out and after it already. And I think that's a good sign. I mean, you start getting him those reps and start getting him back up to speed. And the last hurdle is this, getting him out in live action in a game, because you don't know how you're going to react to being hit until you've been hit. And especially with knee injuries. So and look, I'm not a professional athlete, but I tore a patella tendon, and like the first few times you're back out there, like playing, and you're like, I don't trust it. And he's got to get hit before he gets into like the regular season. So I'd love to see him come back and take a few snaps in the preseason. That would put my mind at ease. But if I'm the Bengals, I'm not rushing him back.
Absolutely not. Yeah. He's the future, right? He's the guy who's going to use all these weapons that have been built around him to take that team to the next level. So I'm with you, man. They just need to get that offensive line beefed up a little bit. Make sure that they're making the right decision on Burrow, because the way it's looking right now, he could be good for the beginning of the season, and that's just all the better for these pass catchers here. Which is what I want to go into next, actually. And I'm curious to hear what you think about how this target distribution is going to work. Like, Jamar Chase has that rapport with Joe Burrow, obviously. We like that. T. Higgins looked like he had the skill set to be a top wide receiver in the league last year in flashes. I'm curious to see if you think that Chase can take that over in the first season, or do you think that Higgins might have, built up that locker room clout maybe, or the coaching staff's trust enough where even with the high draft capital they spent on Chase, Higgins' familiarity could win out?
So Higgins really surprised me last year. I think I had him right at the cusp of that 1-2 turn in rookie draft. So 10, 11, 12. And I was really surprised with how well he played. But, and there's always a but, Jamar Chase is top 5 of all of the wide receivers I've scouted since 2016. He's got a top 5 grade since 2016 for me, and that puts him in some pretty good company. And I don't mean to sound like I'm tooting my horn, but it's CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, and Rondell Moore. That's the one you guys were not talking about today, but he's legit. But those are the top 5 since 2016 that I've got, and I've been doing my film grades and scouting process and kind of honing it in. But I really see him as being a number 1 wide receiver in the league, which means that he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver on the Bengals sooner than later. And I expect it's probably going to be pretty even distribution this year, but it's like he's headed to the moon, and Higgins will be a very solid 2. It's kind of like what I expect watching Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, that kind of passing the torch, and because CeeDee's legit too.
Yeah, and I think kind of similar to what you said about Jeudy with Courtland Sutton coming back, having Jamar Chase there will kind of put T. Higgins in a really good spot for him on that target totem pole, right? The defensive attention. I think Jamar Chase brings a little bit more versatility to the table with being able to be worked out of the slot as well, whereas I think T. Higgins is going to be that deep passing red zone guy, and he's going to be great at it. So, yeah, I think go ahead, man.
No, and Higgins is so good at getting to the sideline, kind of boxing out the defender and making a play on back shoulder throws, which Joe Burrow he's going to absolutely love that. It's going to be move the chains, but you also have Jamar Chase, who can do everything. I mean, he can be a deep threat. He can be a possession guy. He can roll up yards after the catch. He can just do everything. And so that to me, that screams number one wide receiver.
Yeah, for sure. No arguments from either Ty or myself, I'm sure. We're going to go to the backfield, and we're going to go a little quick on these guys. I just want to talk about the guys behind Mixon. We've got Travion Williams, who's a holdover from last season, Chris Evans and Puka Williams, who were both drafted, I believe, this year. And it looks semi-thin behind Joe Mixon there. I'm curious, though, which of those three guys do you think is the guy that gets another or some sort of shot with whatever's left over in this backfield?
I think it's a lot like the Eckler backfield. Like I think that that's why everyone's getting sucked back into Joe Mixon, because there just isn't somebody in that backfield that is going to come in and command touches. I've heard a lot of people kind of hope that Evans is the guy. Puka Williams is a tremendous pass catcher, but he is smaller than my little sister. And so that's not a great thing. Like, he's tiny. He's like 170-ish. Like
under the threshold, basically.
Yeah. He's just not. He's not the type of player who's going to come in and steal touches. And so it looks like Joe Mixon is poised to get most of whatever it is behind that offensive line.
I noticed the hesitation there. Definitely a work in progress up front in front of those running backs there. Ty, brass tacks, who are you taking a shot on out of those guys, Travion, Evans, and Puka?
I definitely, like in a 28 round dynasty startup or something, I'm taking Chris Evans, and then I'm taking Travion as well. Like Travion's got the inside track. It's his job to lose. The guy just has to stay healthy, in my opinion. Whereas Chris Evans, I love. Like, who doesn't love a bad boy, right? But Chris Evans is very interesting. He's got the skill set that we should try and chase at the back of a draft. It's actually to the point that Zach made on his excellent episode, most recent episode of Dynasty Dummies at the end, talking about targeting pass-catching backs who are next to free. And Chris Evans makes that. He's kind of that guy at the very end of a dynasty startup that's deep rosters. yeah,
I think that's well put. Not people.
But Samaje Perine is. I think Samaje Perine's undervalued. Like I think he's undervalued, and I don't.
I kind of dogged him by not even putting him in that group. Hey, that's kind of rude of me. I'm sorry.
Well, I think he's the clear number 2 in that backfield.
I just thought that you were poking my former co-host Kyle, because that like Samaje Perine was like his running back 3 back in the day in that
a lot of people were there.
Rookie class. Yeah. No, I couldn't do it, but there were too many receptions for Kamara there. Like we got to stay.
Yeah. He was enticing for a minute.
The chat was really calling you out there. They were all over that one. Our chat was blowing up with the Bengals. They were really all over the Bengals. Like D Brown was talking about it, and
who day?
Yeah, we had Angie in here too, who's another big Falcons fan, but weighing in on the Bengals. We had Dave going, and the best looking True North Fantasy Football, Brian, the sexiest man alive, voted on by the True North crew. So that's a good chat.
Thank you to everybody for tuning in and bumping there and setting me straight on Samaje Perine. It will never happen again. Actually, I can't make that promise, guys. We're going to just move along to the next team because I think I'll be able to nail this depth chart. And it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've got a lot of youth there with Trevor Lawrence, James Robinson, DJ Chark is still pretty young. Laviska is still young. Marvin Jones was brought in, so it's kind of retooled. And then, of course, they have Urban Meyer at the helm as the coach with his first foray into the NFL head coaching ranks. Zach, what do you think about the offensive identity there? Like Urban has been very run heavy previously in college. He drafted a running back in the first round, of course. How do you see this offense looking? And do you think we'll catch like a bunch of glimpses of those in training camp?
So at the end of last year, I've got a quote from Urban Meyer that says, "I'll fight anybody on this. You have to run the ball to be successful at the highest level." And then he added Darrell Bevel as his offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. So like we're in like full, and I talked about this a little bit on the Dynasty Dummies yesterday, but like I'm in on James Robinson, which I wasn't at the end of the season, because I think he's going to get a ton of run between the tackles. And if something happens, God forbid that there's an injury to ETN or that sort of thing, but like all of a sudden you could see him be that league winner that we've seen from, this is a weird thing to say, but we've seen a league winning running back from Jacksonville the last 2 years in a row, and almost 3 if you count Yeldon when he had that stretch where he went off for, he was the RB7 for 8 games. And
Rest
so
in peace, TJ Yeldon.
Yeah, like Jacksonville is this really weird, like running back kind of oasis that it's not someplace that you would think, but I do think they're going to
Smash Mouth. I kind of think of it.
Well, it's because they don't pay taxes. You make more money while you're down there. As a running back, you can make more money.
That's
it.
So
you're happier and you perform better at your job.
But yeah, like I love James Robinson this year, and not to slight ETN, because I think that they're going to try to use him in kind of that. Like what they used Paris Campbell and kind of that gadgety like space back and Curtis Samuel did the same thing at Ohio State, like that player who is not quite a running back but not quite a receiver, and he'll be successful in that role. That's one of the things that when I looked at film on ETN, everyone was talking about what a great runner he is. I was like, he's like Ronald Jones, but with the ability to catch the ball. Like Ronald Jones is a space back without the ability to catch it. Like ETN can catch it and get in space, and then he is gone. He is fast.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting to see him at the next level. So you just kind of talked about how ETN and James Robinson should shake out. So with the way that you described ETN's role, which I think was fantastic, how do you think that affects Laviska Shenault? Because a lot of people are expecting that breakout. And if ETN is used in that role, are they going to use Laviska in a more traditional role? Obviously, that's something to watch in training camps, but I want to hear how you think he can succeed in that,
He's really raw to me. Like there are things that I really like about Shenault's game, and when he was coming out, like he's fantastic down the field. He was one of the best ball trackers in that class 2 years ago, but like and he's great with the ball. I mean, he's a bully, he's a big, just a big individual, and actually pretty agile for being the size that he is, but it's everything in between that he really kind of struggles with. Like he's not a great technician as a route runner. He doesn't quite know how to sit down in zones. Like there are a lot of things that he needs to work on. And so I think that if you got him kind of clearing out and running downfield and allowing Trevor Lawrence to throw that deep ball and let him track it, that's beneficial. And he can kind of learn on the fly that way. And I do think you're going to see some scheme touches for him. I don't let me speaking highly of Travis Etienne make you think that they're not going to use Shenault at all. But I think that it'll be a lot less than a lot of people who at the beginning of the year were really touting Shenault as like that next guy. I'm tempering expectations there.
Yeah,
maybe it's more like a real. And maybe it's more like a real wide receiver. Like maybe he plays more like a real boy instead of that weaponized, that guy we were hoping would get weaponized before we heard the Curtis Samuel rumors, the Kadarius Toney love, all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully Urban is honest with us about how he's going to be used, because if we want it to be a real boy, Urban's nose is going to start growing and growing and growing if he's lying. So
speaking of real boy, do you guys see Tim Tebow tape was out the other day?
Yeah. Did he look lumbering? Did he look lumbering?
He did. He did not look good.
Oh, man. And just to kind of polish off the Jaguars, Zach, you said that Laviska would be really well used down the field, which I think would be a detriment to the other two guys on the depth chart, in other three guys, even if you count Colin Johnson, with him, DJ Chark, and Marvin Jones. Who do you think of Marvin Jones and DJ Chark can kind of take a majority of that role and be the guy that we want more in fantasy for 2021?
I've been doing this way too long to bet against Marvin Jones. Like he's been disrespected and undervalued. I mean, I remember coming on with Kyle in like 2016, 2017 and saying, looking through the ADP and saying Marvin Jones is a value, and he's been a value every single year since then. And I think you're going to see that same thing play out where, since he left Cincinnati, he has been a fantasy producer every stop, every year. And I think that he'll be that, but I think that there are going to be fewer targets in Jacksonville than people expect, especially with Lawrence coming out, because everyone's like, oh, he's the running back one. I think you're going to see a lot of like RPO, Bevel would like to do that. Urban Meyer like to do that. Even Trevor Lawrence at Clemson, they ran a lot of RPO, and he's a really adept runner. And so it'll be interesting to see what the target market looks like down in Florida.
Yeah, well, they threw it last year 616 times, which is much higher than Urban Meyer would like. I think that defense is going to be a factor as well, because if they're behind in games, they're not going to have a choice, really.
And Bevel, and Darrell Bevel.
Yeah, and Bevel,
too. That's right. Calling plays. Like, I know it'll be the Urban Meyer scheme, but I think Bevel's calling plays. And we saw kind of his personal transformation in his last 2 seasons in Seattle that carried over to Detroit, especially in 2019. And Marvin Jones, what does he do well? It's the high leverage work. Like, I've said all offseason, Trav, he's going to score every single receiving touchdown for this team. But he's got a good shot at monopolizing some of the deep targets too, especially if DJ Chark is not able to do it in preseason. They're going to have no problem just shooting those targets to Mojo.
Who are you taking out of those two, Ty? Marvin Jones or DJ Chark?
Yeah, I'll take DJ Chark just for the upside, because he could really have that high variance season overall where he could be like literally a wide receiver one that's in his range of outcomes in this offense, in my opinion. But I'm definitely, I think I might be higher than you two guys on some of the deep passing we could see, or at least some of the deep shots that could come out of Darrell Bevel's play calling that will work off of the run heavy schemes in the RPO action. So I really like this offense. And to your point, Trav, the defense will factor in heavily. And when it comes to play volume and stuff, which it all trickles down from. So I'm definitely in on some of these Jaguars heading into camp. And I kind of like all the wide receivers, to be completely honest, at their ADP, like almost every single one of them.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good point. Like I said, I've still been a little bit hesitant on Laviska, but the ADP is a good factor, because there are some people who are lagging a little bit on that. So this is the time where I might be able to invest a little bit more confidently in Laviska. Okay, Ty, you want to take us into the next one, my man?
Yeah, and this is like an offense we're always going to want to tie to, and that's Sean Payton's New Orleans Saints. It's always just been so kind of fantasy. Unfortunately, we don't know what the hell's going on at quarterback, really. They've been mum's the word there. So what do you think, Zach? Do you think it's Jameis versus Taysom? Is it a mix of both? Are you drafting either in fantasy? Do you want to draft both?
So I've got a bunch of Taysom Hill on my teams from the last couple of years, because he was free in Superflex, and I hate drafting quarterbacks. And so like I end up at the bottom of the barrel looking around going, well, all right, well, at least he's going to get some work in the offense, regardless of whether he's the starter. I really hope it's Jameis. Like for the sake of fantasy, and not that Michael Thomas, I think will suffer if Taysom Hill is the quarterback, because Taysom Hill seemed to pepper him last year, but the entirety of the offense, it worries me seeing a guy who was designated dual quarterback and tight end, on several fantasy platforms last year at the helm of such a high-powered offense.
Totally. But yeah, to your guys, like, it was still pretty good last year, at least for the condensed pieces there. And, with that offensive line, the yards after the catch element, there's definitely some advantages there. If it is Jameis, though, you're right. Like, we're way more interested in some of the pieces. But who do you think the third option is behind Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara? Like, we have Tre'Quan Smith, who I like. I've been waiting forever. Marquez Callaway, I don't mind. Or do you think we see maybe tight end Adam Troutman take off?
So I would love to see if Jameis is there and starting. I think Tre'Quan Smith has that elusive breakout that we've been waiting for a couple of years.
Yes.
I mean, he was the downfield threat. Out of college, he was almost 14, then 15, then almost 20 yards per reception. His 3 years coming out of school, and you also saw Jameis, throw downfield. With Tampa, the yards after catch suffers with Winston. I don't think he's accurate. You watched Mike Evans, and I used to joke. I said Mike Evans doesn't have yak, he has FAC. He has fall after catch. His yards after catch were actually fewer. Like he's taller than he had yards after the catch while he was playing with Winston. So I'm a little concerned about that aspect, but that's not Tre'Quan Smith's game. Tre'Quan Smith's game is get downfield and high point. And Jameis Winston, for all of his faults, he is not afraid to be a swashbuckler. He will throw that ball down the field, and that would be nice for Tre'Quan Smith. If it ends up being Hill, then I'm a lot more interested in Troutman. Close to the line of scrimmage, and with the ability to run some interesting things near the goal line and get him open on, like a pick and pop, like a screen and get out in the flat. So I think that's how I'm playing it, but that's just a nightmare. It's really, Michael Thomas is undervalued. Alvin Kamara is kind of in that last year in Dynasty before people just like sell and run away, and then everything else is a crapshoot.
So what do you think for running back 2? You have no interest? Because let me just run this down really quick. This is the last 10 years. This is just the running back scoring for the New Orleans Saints. They've scored first, second, the first, second, first, eighth, and then last year again they scored the first. The most fantasy points among the running back position in all of fantasy football. So it's a pretty coveted backfield.
That's a fantastic point with Latavius, because 8 games last year, he had 10 or more carries. And in 13 of the 15 games he played, he had at least 1 reception, and a whole bunch of games with 3. And you're right. That's a backfield where it's like zero RB dream, where you can get Latavius Murray. Agreed. He's undervalued because he's older. And if something happened, again, you're not wishing that on anybody, but it's the anti-fragile strategy. I mean, that's what you're doing, is you're playing because running backs get injured. And even if you don't play zero RB at the top of your draft, just understanding the concept of how that works and adding players like Latavius Murray at the back end of your drafts, that's a winning strategy. So I love that. I'm really glad that you caught that, because I would have just completely glossed over him. And I need some Latavius in my life.
Yeah. Former running back one, and gave you 2 running back 1 weeks last year, which is sweet.
And he looked good last year too. Like, he didn't look bad. He didn't look how old he is. He looked fine last year, I thought. And that offensive line is definitely an elite unit. And yeah, just you probably want running backs from the unit that scored the most fantasy points in like 6 of the last 8 seasons, and second most. And yeah, it's just crazy. Trav, who are you taking in that entire offense not named Alvin Kamara or Michael Thomas?
I think it's got to be the Rainbow Trout. Yeah. I just think I really, like you guys, want Jameis Winston to be the quarterback, which in that case, give me some Tre'Quan. Love some Tre'Quan, need some Tre'Quan. But I just, with Taysom in there, Taysom started 8 games last year, and he only threw 9 passes more than 20 yards down the field. So that doesn't play to any of those guys aside from Adam Troutman, and you're really just hoping for that red zone upside and some yards after the catch for the big man from Dayton. So it's got to be the Trout bomb for me. And that's kind of the only, maybe Tre'Quan super late with the chance for Jameis Winston to come in there and boost his value and give you maybe some late season spike weeks or something like that. But I don't think he's going to necessarily turn into a league winner. You know what I mean? I think it's just going to be like a couple of those spike weeks down the field, which are great, but
And it wasn't just the air yards that killed Jameis Winston's yak, what he provides to his wide receivers yards after the catch. It's also how often he's targeted tight ends, and that goes all the way back to college too. So Jameis has always liked him. I think Troutman might be the answer regardless, unless you're in a best ball tournament, and then maybe Tre'Quan Smith's your man. Speaking of best ball, people seem to like the Seattle Seahawks more in best ball. And how are we approaching the Seahawks? I don't know. There's probably no Chef Boy Russ expectations right now, but the new offensive coordinator comes in. What do you think he does for this unit, Zach? Because do you think there's some efficiency that can compensate for a lack of volume that we know is gonna be a problem?
It's really strange though, because you got Shane Waldron coming in as the offensive coordinator from the Rams, but he wasn't the play caller. McVay was. So I have no idea like what, it's going to be really interesting to see what manifests. I'm so frustrated with Seattle the last few years. It's for a city full of foodies, like they have a piss poor understanding about how to let someone cook. Like they just, it's been really, really bad. Yeah. But the other thing though, the thing though with Waldron coming in is everyone wants to point to McVay. Everyone wants to point to the Rams, but look, if they tell you that they know what's going to happen, they're selling something. I mean, look at Nagy with the Bears. Nagy was coming in and he was going to be the Andy Reid offense, and look at what I mean. That's not the Chiefs, and so I don't know. I think Lockett and DK are solid, but they always are. I think Chris Carson is probably in the running for like a back end RB1, but he has been for the last couple of years. So I don't know that there's any information I can glean from this that is going to help us. But I can't tell you Dwayne Eskridge is going to be the man.
Well, do you think let's actually go to the running back room really quick. What do you think we glean from Rashad Penny during preseason? How do you think they try and unleash him and he has an Amir Abdullah offseason or what?
I think it will be really telling how healthy Penny is, how much they use him in the preseason. It will be nice to get him back on the field. He was fantastic in the few games where he actually got the reins and he was healthy. He was very good. I even wrote Procise, though. Yeah, I wrote a Penny parody song. But
I remember it very well. Yeah,
but it's just been health for him. The thing with this team, though, is it's always been the next man up, and they haven't been worried about whether they're an undrafted free agent or whether they, like Penny, were a first-round pick. It doesn't matter. So I don't mind stashing Penny, but I am also looking at somebody like Alex Collins, who is at the back end of that roster, who has been very good before. He's had off-field troubles, but he's a player familiar with Seattle, and whoever. Yeah, whoever ends up there is probably going to produce, just because it's like you said, prolific offenses, good offenses. You want the running game with those teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there could be even more rushing when you talk about Lockett and DK. They had a total monopoly. I'm talking over 50% of everything: air yards, end zone targets, everything. So there is a ton of available volume there, and that might some transfer to the run game. Trav, what do you think happens there? Are you interested in Penny? Do you think Chris Carson is undervalued? And do you think there's a pass catching role that needs to be captured by a running back, or does that go to Chris Carson? I think that is going to define a season for me.
I think, and that's still what's up in the air, because Penny profiles really well like that too. You mentioned the flashes, Zach. I'm an Eagles fan, and one of Penny's best career plays is a sick reception against my Eagles, where he took it 60 yards, and he looked like a design incredible. Screen too. Yeah, it was really, really nice. And so it's interesting to see, because we got Chris Carson, who's also had a 46 reception season, which is probably on the high end of what we're going to expect as far as receptions out of a Seattle running back. So I'm still undecided on that. I would say Chris Carson is still a little bit undervalued, Ty, but he's kind of catching up there as well in drafts. He's kind of that guy. I've seen him go as the first guy behind kind of that tier, you know what I mean? That tier where there's a little bit of certainty, and then Chris Carson just feels like the next guy that comes up. I kind of treat this backfield similar to the San Francisco backfield, where I'm going to snipe little pieces here and there, just because, they run the ball a lot. There is that attrition factor, and somebody late season always gets a couple good weeks out of this backfield. So I'd even go as deep as DJ Dallas in one of those deep leagues, Ty, and just kind of take that shot. I think, it's kind of obviously tougher in your redraft leagues because you're not holding on to DJ Dallas for 8 weeks, but even somebody to keep an eye out mid-season. But of course, we're talking about training camp. So the thing that I'm watching is just how much receiving work do we see out of Penny, and what's that health look like?
Yeah, and how much do they want to run the ball, And just back to Zach's point about we don't know what Waldron's going to do. Well, I bet he wouldn't have got that job if he didn't agree to the confines of a frickin' Pete Carroll offense, because that seems to be the unceremonious divorce that all the offensive coordinators and Russell Wilson, we remember the list, buddy. You can't just say you never wanted out. Like, we saw the list. We heard about the list. We know about the list.
It was in Ciara's handwriting.
And Dave, yeah, that's right. And Dave mentioned Gerald Everett, who obviously has a connection to Shane Waldron and is certainly in contention as the third option in that passing game. And just to go back to some of that available volume, that could kind of end just to show that monopoly that Locke and DK had. They had over 30 end zone targets last year, according to PFF, which dwarfs most teams. And behind them, guys, the next 3 most targeted Seahawks in the end zone from 2020 are all gone, leaving over 20 end zone targets behind. 10 end zone touchdowns are gone. That is 4 more than the Patriots had as a team last season, which is where I want to go next, to the New England Patriots, because if it's Cam Newton again, we might see another similar complex where there is very little passing touchdowns into the end zone next year and very little work for all these running backs that we usually like from the Patriots system. So how are you approaching that quarterback situation with Mac and Cam?
I can't do this without getting, because I'm a Pats fan. I'm up in Maine. I've been a Pats fan.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I apologize, because usually people take offense to that when I say, maybe not now because
that's good how objective you are. Like, I followed your work for quite some time and I don't even think I knew that. So that's some marvelous objectivity.
Well, I mean, look, I'm old enough to have been through the Rod Rust era, so I know better than to rub in, the championships. Yeah. So, but as a Pats fan, I want to see Mac Jones as soon as possible, because I want to get to the next era. I want to see if that first round pick is going to pan out. Although that's actually not true. What I really wanted as a Pats fan was them to trade up like 3 or 4 picks and have it be the Justin Fields era. Like, that's what I was cheering for when he started falling. I was like, it's going to happen.
As soon as he passed Denver.
Yeah.
Man, crazy.
I was ready, and it just didn't happen. But that's if Cam starts, he's pretty much the only piece in that offense that you're going to be able to count on. He's scoring the red zone touchdowns. I mean, he calls his own number more than any player I've ever seen, and is successful at it. And so I guess, like, I have real trouble buying into that team now with all of the nebulousness. Your defense is going to come back. They should be a lot better this year than they were last year.
Yeah.
So you don't have to score, 30 points to win a game. Not that they could. I mean, obviously you saw that last year. It's amazing how
competitive they were last year.
Yeah.
Having, without that even in the range of outcomes. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, for the rest of the team, like, this is the 3rd year in a row that Damian Harris has a lock on running back 1 in camp. Like, we've heard that.
Yeah.
This is the year, Zach.
Yeah.
This is it, man.
And then it's always like Sony Michel on one leg rushing for 900 yards. Like, that's like, it's not pretty.
And
but
everyone's just chasing like LeGarrette Blount 2016 anyways, which is just such a foul in itself. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because you mentioned you want the teams with the running backs that score, and the Patriots have always had a pretty prolific fantasy running back room, except for it's never been one person. It's always been kind of an amalgamation of whoever's there, and with the exception of the one LeGarrette Blount season where he had 20 touchdowns, and I guess the James White 120 target, like, but
the 2018 James White season can happen.
Yeah. But I don't, like, it's really hard to look at this team and get really excited for fantasy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I want to. It's hard. I can't.
Yeah, well, the steam's picking up even for Damian Harris, who's somebody that I've kind of liked, but I think Cam just really sucks that dry because it's the touchdowns that we want, right? Like Damian Harris can give us some good work between the 20s, but if he's not going to get that red zone work, it's just a way less lucrative role.
And what I was going to ask Zach to follow up that he completely answered, with his tone is that, how much is this being baked into his ADP that we do have to wait on some of these guys, whether it's a Damian Harris for that ultimate spot that you're envisioning, we do have to wait still. And even a Ramondre Stevenson coming in might hurt him. Like, I don't know where else he's going to be used other than the goal line. The guy's a super freak.
Yeah. And we've got kind of a track record from Belichick where he stayed with that veteran for as long as, Bledsoe, you watch Bledsoe not be as good as Brady and then still stick. And then eventually he shipped him. But it's, I don't,
he just loves veterans. Yeah.
It's well, and I think he is really of the mindset that you have to earn it. And so it's Mac Jones has got to come in and earn it. And so I'm really fearful that it's going to be a lot of Cam until the wheels fall off and then maybe some Mac Jones at the end of the season to see what we got. But
yeah. So this is too depressing. I'll ask one more question just for the super depressed N'Keal Harry dynasty owners. Do you think he gets traded or benched all year? Because it feels like only those two options are possible.
It's funny because I'd love to see him. Like, he's like the one guy on that roster that actually fits with the way Cam throws.
Yeah.
Like he's really
but Jacoby Myers, I like Jacoby Myers quite a bit. I think he's just so much better than him.
For sure, but like the size and the weight,
I see what you're saying.
Cam was successful with Calvin Benjamin. Cam was successful with Devin Funchess, and he's really in that that big body guy who's not a great route runner but can go up and get it. And it's really frustrating to watch N'Keal Harry and watch the way he's been used. And I would never besmirch Bill Belichick, and I would never deign to think I know more than he does. But N'Keal Harry is that type of player that you need to use him near the line of scrimmage. He really needs to be that big slot, that like Marquez Colston. Yeah. But there's never been a role for him because you had Edelman there, and now all of a sudden Jacoby Myers is kind of filling that role. Or Oshevsky, like there's always somebody else in that role, and so it's really it's really frustrating to kind of see N'Keal Harry.
That's a great point though. Like, think about AJ Brown and N'Keal Harry and how close we all were in the prospect evaluation process, and they both were heavily on the backs of what they could do after the catch. They both had elite yards after the catch. Like, I thought N'Keal Harry was going to be a return guy. So. Yeah, this hurts. So I think there's still a little bit of optimism, though, if he was to be to find himself in a good situation.
Yeah, only Keel. So that's all you can say, right? Like, you can't really get excited about it anymore. Unfortunately, I think you would have to move to a really good spot with a really good quarterback for me to have any interest in N'Keal Harry, which is unfortunate because he is Canadian born. So we do have that little piece in our hearts held for him.
Is he?
I think he was Canadian born. Yep. I'm pretty sure.
I thought he just chilled here for like a couple of years or something.
Well, either way, we're claiming him because we don't have that many players in the NFL, Ty, so we're claiming them. Yeah. I got a couple more teams on the Darnell docket here, fellas, but I just do want to give a shout out to the Fantasy Points Media Group. We are a part of that crew of incredible brands of fantasy football content producers, putting out some really good stuff for every sort of format you could want to play. So make sure you hit the account every Friday. They put a recap of all the episodes that the groups did per week. But what I really want to get to there is the fantasypoints.com website and all of the tools and the resources that you can find there. All sorts of leaderboards, all sorts of different stat databases that you can dig into. You've also got the elite analysis articles, like by the hundreds coming out. That's might be a little exaggeration, but I know Scott Barrett himself has put out like 2 or 3 this week. Graham Barfield's put out a couple, and then the rest of the team's doing fantastic work. Ty and I recently just went on a Fantasy Points live stream draft, and you can find exclusive live streams for people who sign up over there, as well as the Discord that they've got, which is a really cool community that gives you access to all those analysts. They do some AMAs and stuff over there as well. So if you want to sign up for Fantasy Points and everything that comes along with it, you can go to fantasypoints.com, and when you sign up, use our promo code 21TrueNorth10 for 10% off of that. We really appreciate that. And if you do that, let us know, show us, or we'll show you some love on Twitter. We really appreciate anyone who checks it out. Let us know what you like digging into on the site as well. We really like to hear that as well. And that's what Ty and I use as a resource for a lot of the information we give out on the show. So it's been nothing but a pleasure to be linked up with them. And we're super excited for the future with that crew as well. So the teams that I have to kind of round us out here are in the Big Apple. We're going to talk about the two New York teams, and we are going to start with the New York Giants. I think there's just a lot to shake out in both of these teams. For the Giants, Saquon's coming back from that injury. We don't know if he's going to be a full go. Daniel Jones with those new weapons, obviously some O-line and offensive coordinator concerns as well on that team. But I do want to start with Saquon Barkley. Zach, do you think that he is going to get that workload that we saw in like his rookie season, or do you think the addition of Devin Booker is kind of a signal that they might want to limit him a little bit just to try and keep him fresh?
I think it's a signal that, unfortunately, in the NFL, running backs are disposable, and they're going to run Saquon until they have to run Booker. And Saquon is such a big part of that offense and such a big weapon. And you've also seen, what the Cowboys did with Ezekiel Elliott and how, what a big part of that offense he was. I think you're going to see a similar thing with Saquon. Like, I'm in on Saquon this year. And a lot of people, I mean, you've seen Saquon and you've seen Christian McCaffrey and you've seen people kind of back up because there's this little psychological piece. When a guy gets hurt and you lose your league because you took him in the first round, it's really hard to come back and draft them again. And so you're seeing these guys fall. And you saw the same thing a couple of years ago with Kamara when he had the high ankle sprain and people were looking for Kamara to be, an elite back, and he was good but not great because of the high ankle sprain. People, like, he dropped in drafts at the beginning of last year, and then he came out and just dominated the league. And so it's this thing where, like, I'll reap the benefits of people being afraid of the injury and also the Giants being in a position where they're just going to run Saquon until, he can't run anymore. I mean, he's under contract 2 more years. That's $17 million guaranteed. And I think that he's going to be the bell cow until he's done with that contract.
Yeah, I think they would probably be silly not to, because he's the best avenue for them to be a winning team as well. Like, I think they've made some nice additions to the passing game, but Saquon is going to be the engine that runs this team. I don't think it's going to be Daniel Jones. I don't think they're ready to heap that on him. Ty, I'm curious, what do you think about Daniel Jones? Do you think he is going to be somebody that we like for fantasy, or is he going to be one of those streamer guys, or can we rely on him as that, solid quarterback 2 in our Superflex leagues?
Yeah, look, I think Daniel Jones is actually probably the guy that you should grab because I actually think there's a lot of uncertainty and there's going to be a lot of volatility on a week-to-week basis in this passing game when it comes to who you want to start in your freaking fantasy football lineups. The one guy who might be able to capture a lot of that, encompass a lot of that, is Daniel Jones. And that it's what you said off the top. It is that offensive line. It is Jason Garrett, because what we need is a lot of the deep passing. We need Saquon to come back and do his thing in the run game and set up that play action, because Daniel Jones was quietly a really good deep passer last year. So I think there's room for upside. He checks the box where he'll give you a couple 100 yards and a couple touchdowns with his legs. So I think he's still interesting, and I've actually moved him just ahead of Tua Tagovailoa recently in my ranks. So I'm kind of really rising on Daniel Jones just because I do like a lot of the weapons. We should also mention that Kadarius Toney was placed on the COVID list today, I believe. So we'll see what happens there. But Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, like there's so many weapons that I'm not sure what's going to happen with them individually. But Daniel Jones is somebody that maybe I can reap the rewards of the offense improving as a whole. Because just as a note, I have it here in my notes. Only 2 teams failed to score 300 total points last season. That were the 2 New York teams. Only 2 teams failed to have 5,000 yards on offense, and they were both the New York teams. So something was just in the water, and the Wicked Witch is dead with Gase, and hopefully Jason Garrett can do something here to put some explosive plays back in this offense, because they're there, and Daniel Jones can deliver those, and they have all these weapons now to facilitate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like how you said that. It just seems like there's some good fits for Daniel Jones's skill set, aside from having like 7 slot guys on that wide receiver depth chart and trying to put them in those versatile outside roles. So talking about those pass catchers, Zach, I think we could probably all agree that Kenny Golladay is the number 1 pass catcher there. Who do you think is number? Yeah, maybe a good call. Yeah. Who do you think is number 2 behind Kenny Golladay, excluding Saquon Barkley?
It's Sterling Shepard, and it always has been, and it will continue. Like he's another one of those undervalued like guys who play the second fiddle, but actually produce. And if you look at, so I have Peter Howard. I have kind of an understanding with him where I say, Peter, I don't math. And so if I need something, I'll go ask him. And so a couple of years ago, I asked him to put together a database of slot rates, because I started looking at the NFL and started looking at the way receivers are used, and they start moving like number 1 receivers inside more. And I kind of had a theory on this. And so I started looking at Sterling Shepard's slot rates, because on the show sheet, you mentioned that, maybe he'll move inside, move outside, try to figure out what that looked like. Well, since 2016, his slot percentage has gone from 74 to 55 to 49.9 to 40, and last year 23.6%. So his slot percentage has gone way down, and he had 350 more air yards last year than he did in 2019. Like he's pretty versatile, but if you get him back in the slot a little bit, I think that there's a lot of meat on the bone too. So he's that second player. The other thing I think with this offense, and this was the sleeper pick in the Scott Fish Bowl, because the tight end premium, the first downs.
Yeah.
Evan Ingram last year was the 5th most targeted tight end.
Mm-hmm.
He had 1 touchdown last year. Yeah. Regression to the mean says he's going to be a tight end 1 this year.
Yes, sir. Yeah, well, I just kind of to your point. Sorry to cut you off there, man. He's like the only guy in his range of the draft that has that 100 target ability. Now, 100 targets might be a little hefty with the weapons that they added, but I think those weapons, I think those are going to be good for him. Like, he's not going to have to be the, most explosive guy on this offense, So I love that call on Evan Ingram. Ty and I were talking to Jeff Lambert about Evan Ingram just a couple episodes ago. And it was right in the thick of Scott Fishbowl. So you nailed that one, Zach. And I unfortunately didn't get him on my Scott Fishbowl roster, but I think people who did are going to definitely enjoy that. Ty, where are you sitting on the ancillary pieces behind Kenny Golladay? Do you agree that it's Sterling Shepard? And do you think we could see anything out of old Darius the Slayer Slayton?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in lockstep with Zach when it comes to Sterling Shepard. I do think he's outside because of the lack of perimeter options that they have. That's kind of what's driven him outside mostly. I think he's probably best suited in the slot. It's just that he is the best, outside wide receiver they've had over the last couple of years. Yeah. My other issue is that, when I'm looking at a wide receiver 5, sometimes I'm not looking for a guy like Sterling Shepard necessarily. Having said that, this touchdown thing with Evan Ingram is definitely the most obvious thing to spot, and it seems like his ADP just isn't reflecting that. I think Daniel Jones had over a 5% touchdown rate as a rookie and had a 2.5% touchdown rate last year. And we know touchdown rates fluctuate and return to the mean pretty quickly. So I think there's a lot of optimism for a lot of the pieces, but I do think there's going to be a complex where you're going to have a hard time deciding who to start on a weekly basis. But I think the Sterling Shepard information was important to get out there because Darius Slayton's going to have an amazing camp, you know what I mean, to have any role Because they might be moving on from him is what I'm saying.
For sure.
As long as all these pieces are healthy going into the season, because you have Evan Ingram who's able to play in the slot, and you have Kadarius Toney, even Saquon Barkley. So they have a ton of options there. So it's a really exciting offense. I'm just not sure I'm super interested because they need to improve so much that I'll probably just still attack Daniel Jones, I think, at ADP, and Evan Ingram. Yeah, Evan Ingram too.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I've been big time on Darius Slayton in the past, but I think the only pertinent move maybe for Darius Slayton, I just did this in a recent draft, and Ty, you are more of the best ball guy than I am, but stacking him with Kenny Golladay just to make sure that you have all of the potential deep work in New York if they decide to go that route. So that's where I added Darius the Slayer Slayton. Zach, before we move on to the Jets, what do you think Toney's role will look like? Do you is that the biggest story to monitor for? Well, I guess maybe not Saquon is, but is that like one of the biggest pass catching pieces to monitor is how they're using Kadarius Toney?
It's really weird because when I watched Kadarius Toney on film, like he's great with the ball in space, but getting him, it's a lot like what we talked about in Jacksonville. Like getting him the ball is the big trick. Like once he's got it, it's great. And I don't know that, I don't know that offense is going to be kind of forward thinking enough to make Kadarius Toney into a piece that's really going to be fantasy relevant, because it's hard in the NFL. It's really hard to make one of those gadget players relevant for fantasy just because you don't get the volume. It's sometimes it's high leverage touches, but like it's not the volume. And so I didn't touch Kadarius Toney anywhere because he's gone so high. I mean, like people have moved him up into the first round of rookie drafts just because of the draft capital. I'm like I understand draft capital is fairly predictive, but fairly predictive is like 45% predictive. Like when we're talking numbers, like when you start doing R values and people are like, oh yeah, well this is a great and then I'm like, hey Peter, what's the actual? He's like, oh, it's like 12%. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's nice. If you keep adding things that give you, a 12% advantage, then you actually have a big advantage. But like, I still, when it comes to push comes to shove, I end up going back to my film evaluation, and I'm really, really tepid on Kadarius Toney and then Kadarius Toney in the Giants offense.
Yeah. No, I think that was really well put. Ty, you got any parting shots on Tony?
No, I like Kadarius Toney as a talent. I couldn't think of a worse spot for him to land in. Like it just goes back to Jason Garrett again. Like I think, he's a guy that number one, he needs to get on the field. And we've already talked about the numerous options that they have in the slot. So that's the number one thing. Number two, he needs touches to be manufactured for him. So that's always frustrating. And these are some of the least valuable touches that you can see in fantasy football, screen passes. So, there's not a lot of upside to capture, especially because he has a lot of buzz. I think he went in like the 14th round of that Fantasy Points best ball draft that we did, which was really surprising to me because I like Kadarius Toney. I think he does have upside. I'm just not sure that he has like a big ceiling. Like he has upside from a talent perspective. I just don't know what his upside is from a fantasy's perspective, especially in year one, especially because he's going to be behind the 8 ball now that he's on the COVID list. So there's just so many reasons that I'm kind of going to be out of love with Kadarius Toney. Like you think of someone like Tutu Atwell, who I hate. I just think he's too tiny. You know that, Trav. I just think he doesn't meet the threshold. Simple as that. Yeah. But he couldn't have landed in a more perfect spot with Sean McVay, who uses motion and pre-snap motion like you wouldn't believe. He uses play action, everything. So that's the kind of system you would have loved Kadarius Toney to land in, but he didn't.
Clap, 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 clap.
So you're making enemies talking bad about Toney.
Yeah, definitely. So into the New York Jets, a lot of newness here with Zach Wilson coming in as the second overall pick. They brought in Corey Davis for him. They brought in Michael Carter in that draft as well as a running back who could have a significant role. But I think the first thing that we want to know, Zach, is what's the identity of this team going to be? They've got Mike LaFleur coming in from that Shanahan system that was heavily into the run game. I mentioned earlier, San Francisco is a backfield that we really want to target. So do you think they're going to be really run heavy like that? Or do you think that they're going to let Zach Wilson cook a little bit to take from Russell Wilson, move it over to Zach Wilson? Has he got his frying pan and his spatula out, or is he just going to be handing the ball off?
So I think the important thing with the Jets is it's not Adam Gase. Like that's like right from there, from the jump, Amen. We're feeling good about it. But yeah, like you said, LaFleur is a Shanahan disciple. So you're talking West Coast offense, you're talking outside zone scheme, you're talking lots of play action. But I did see a quote from him, which was pretty self-aware, which you don't always get from NFL front offices, is he said, we're going to adapt to the players that we have. Mm-hmm. And if he is being honest, that sounds like a lot of fun because you've got Zach Wilson who can do a lot of things. He moves the pocket very well. He throws off platform very well. He sometimes throws into traffic very well. But like, he does a lot of things. People compare him to Favre. People compare him to like Mahomes in college where he was the gunslinger. And so that's exciting. And I think you missed one of the most important pieces that they added, but they added Elijah Moore.
Yes.
Elijah Moore. Man. And you've already heard in rookie minicamp the buzz coming out about Elijah Moore and how good he looked. And I think that that's something to pay attention to and continue to listen for. So I had my top tier of receivers in this class and then Elijah Moore, like right there behind it. And he is the type of player who can do just about everything. He was very good out of the slot. He's very good at finding zones. And he does this really interesting thing, which you don't see a lot of college players have the wherewithal to do. But when the top of the zone, so when the safety cheats up, he does a really good job of like deking inside and going over the top. And most players are content to sit underneath that zone, but he'll go take that big play. And I think that really meshes well with Zach Wilson. And so that's a pair that I'm excited about for this year, but also Dynasty looking forward, I'm excited about.
Absolutely. And, totally missing the boat on these depth charts here, but I will say that I was getting to Elijah Moore, but you led me right into my next question, actually. With Elijah Moore coming in there and looking like a really good slot option, do you think Jamison Crowder is going to hinder that this year, or do you think Elijah's going to move a little bit more? How do you think that works? Because they are retaining Jamison Crowder. There was a lot of speculation on his release, but it just didn't really make sense with the cap space they still had. So do you think he's a factor, or is he just kind of a mentor?
I think that Moore probably has more versatility than Crowder. Yeah. I mean, Crowder's pretty much relegated to the slot. And in fact, like I rode Crowder last year basically to playoffs in all of my leagues because he's a guy that you could get for nothing and the volume. But I don't think that you're going to see that this year. I think that the offense is going to change. I think that you've got a little bit more flexibility with the quarterback and also the pieces that they brought in. And so, look, Crowder will probably be in the slot and move Elijah Moore outside, but I think you see a lot of that kind of cross-pollination where Moore will play inside some. You're seeing, again, and I mentioned this earlier, but you're seeing number one wide receivers move into the slot to take advantage of matchups, take advantage of, maybe you get a zone on the inside, or maybe you get the slot corner, maybe you can get out and get on a linebacker. So that's what I see. I'm not worried about Crowder being there. It was odd to see him come back, but I don't think it's that big a hindrance to Davis or Moore.
Good stuff. Yeah. And so Corey Davis is probably atop that depth chart. But I think below on the depth chart, we're probably looking at Denzel Mims and Keelan Cole. Do you have interest in either of them for 2021? Is that like something that you're going to be monitoring, or is it just kind of a net zero for you?
Yeah, I was really excited about Mims, and then it just kind of flamed out. And with the addition of Elijah Moore as early as they drafted him, and the addition of Corey Davis, there's really not room for Mims to make any hay as a fantasy asset, which is too bad, because he did some things that I really liked as a pass catcher.
I liked him a lot. I definitely liked him a lot. Ty, I know you're a big Keelan Cole guy. I know you love.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing, right? Like, I never disliked Denzel Mims, and I remember he came to the Senior Bowl and kind of bucked a lot of the Baylor narratives that were already wrong about him. He showed some nuance. Like, I liked him. He was just a little bit older. And long story short, I just think Mims is he's really in the doghouse somehow in this new regime already. It's bizarre. But it's because I love Keelan Cole, and it might just be how good these other wide receivers have been. And then someone like Crowder, who, you can just slop in the slot for 70% of the snaps, because I think Zach hit the nail on the head there that we're devaluing the slot position. It's going from like a 10 out of 10 in the value meter with Darno and Gase and them to like 2 with Zach Wilson and this new system. So, yeah, I think a lot of this will come down to the offensive line, you know what I mean, too, like how well they can protect and
looking good.
They traded out. Yeah, so what did they trade up for Elijah Vera Tucker?
Vera Tucker, Becton on the left side. So the left side of that line is going to be slick.
And just to go back to the New York teams, though, PFF had the two worst graded offensive lines as the 2 New York teams. So they definitely got a lot of work to go. They allowed pressure in 2.5 seconds or less on 28% of their dropbacks, by far the worst in the NFL. Over 40% of the time, Sam Darnold was pressured last season, and even their run blocking. I know we're excited about the outside zone scheme, but they averaged just 1.1 yards before contact per carry, 3rd worst last year. So the Jets have a lot of room to improve, but there's definitely a lot to be said. We've said this a few times this offseason, Trav, going from 32nd in a lot of these statistics to 25th will make a big difference. And maybe it's a way that you can see multiple weapons being supported in this offense, but definitely fading Mims hard and getting rid of him in Dynasty, to be honest, if I can.
Yeah, no, I hear that. So
buying Elijah Mitchell high. Elijah Moore,
yeah, for sure. Maybe dabble in a little bit of Elijah Mitchell too. Nothing wrong with that. We are talking that Shanahan system, right? So I'm not even going to ask about Chris Herndon, gentlemen. Zach, I only want another couple minutes here because I know we've kept you for $1.50 here, and we really, really appreciate it. The backfield in New York, I think, is very important for us to touch on here. Do you think Michael Carter takes that role? Do you think Tevin Coleman was brought in for a reason? And who's next up on the depth chart behind those two?
I think Coleman probably has the inside track as the veteran, as somebody who has played in the Shanahan scheme, in 2 different places, albeit injured in San Francisco. Like, I really think that he's got the build, the body type. Probably it's his job to lose. Michael Carter is interesting. So Michael Carter's probably the change of pace back in that backfield, but in that type of scheme, the change of pace back is getting a pretty good chunk of run. So I don't hate that for him. I mean, he's not a big guy. He's 5'8", maybe a little over 200. So he's not a guy that you're going to give 250 carries to. But if you can get him on the outside, you can get him the ball in space. He's very, very dangerous. And those are the touches that excite me anyway. And so I like this kind of thunder and lightning thing that they've got going. I think that Carter you hate to say Alvin Kamara role because nobody's Alvin Kamara, but that type of, when they had Mark Ingram and Kamara getting the receiving work and kind of the really high value touches. It's the Scott Barrett. It's 2 point. I can't remember what it is, but it's like 2.8,
2.38 or 6.8 or something.
So it's
2.8.
Yeah, it's 2.85. There you go.
And I think it's projection season, so safer than sorry approach. Just say 2.5, right? Just think of it as like 2.5.
There you go.
But it is. It's the value of a reception over the value of a carry. And so for that reason, I think, Michael Carter's probably the guy that I'm more interested in the backfield. The problem is, so is everybody else.
Yeah, true that. Yeah, he's getting up into like the 7th, 8th round in some drafts, and that's, really hard to buy into. You mentioned Kamara and Ingram there, and I was thinking kind of similar to what we're seeing, and not on like a talent level. It's definitely a light version of kind of the Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams situation, where Kevin Coleman's in there, but he's just waiting to get usurped by Michael Carter. They're just waiting to be able to rely on Michael Carter, and I think that frame can hold up in this kind of system where he's going to be running outside a lot. He's not going to be banging a whole bunch. We saw Raheem Mostert be successful in a similar, what we think is going to be a similar run scheme. And Michael Carter's got a little bit of weight on Raheem Mostert as well. So hopefully he can stay healthy, because I think he's going to give us a lot of explosiveness for sure.
Yeah, even the Tevin Coleman, Devontae Freeman backfield.
There you go.
From
a
couple of years ago. I mean, it's kind of got that vibe. So
Tevin Coleman's
that's a really good point.
Roles.
And Devontae Freeman was definitely not even a tweener. He was a smaller running back.
Yeah.
Good
big base though. He had those legs, man.
Yeah, he did. Mm-hmm.
He's thick. Yeah. Awesome, gentlemen. Awesome. Well, Zach, I cannot thank you enough for joining us tonight. It has been an absolute pleasure. We are just past an hour and a half, and I could probably sit here and chat for another hour and a half, but I won't keep you for that long. I appreciate you sticking around for that long, my friend.
Oh, this was an absolute blast, fellas. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk football, but also, talk with people that I don't get a chance to, and good people that I don't get a chance to talk with, so this was fantastic.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we really appreciate it. So anybody who's listening, go find Zach on Twitter at TacitAssassin13. Go check out the Dynasty Dummies podcast. It is incredible, and you will be able to hear those majestic pipes from Zach. Potentially the songbird of his generation, but I don't want to heap too much pressure on you, Zach. Go check out that content. It's incredible. Really good stuff over there. Ty, you have any parting shots? Do you have any parting shots for the people, my friend?
No, I am shart free, but any
sharding pots for the people.
I really appreciate Zach coming on, because we were talking before the show. It really is, and Zach just said it's good talking to good people, and that's what is really just transparent, shines through with people like Spaceman, like Peter Howard, and yourself, John Bosch. All these people are people who really give back to the community, and in my opinion, just have built such a strong community, going back to you guys just being some of the OGs, some of the first pods and stuff that I followed, some of my first Twitter follows. So always just a real pleasure to get to interact with you guys, and hope we can do it again.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. All right. Yeah. So like I mentioned before, thank you to the Fantasy Points Media Group, as well as Monkey Knife Fight. And as well as that, we want to give a big thank you to Trophy Smack, one of our other sponsors as well. That promo code's TNFF. All that stuff's going to be in the description. Check it out, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are also on Twitch, and you can find the crew at True North FFB on Twitter, and this podcast at TNFF Pod. So with all of that rambling, I want to say thank you to everybody who has tuned in. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next week. Peace.